Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Higher Education Tableau User Group meeting for September 2024. We're so glad that you could join us today. We have a fabulous agenda for you. We're going to start off with our Meet a Community member, Denny Bromley from Tableau Research, followed by tips and tricks on data suppression in Tableau with Eric Atchison from Arkansas State University System. And then Roshni is going to wrap it all up with under the dashboard walk and show us a little behind the scenes work in the XML file and the JSON file, if I remember correctly. And then we'll, of course, have our wrap up and chat in breakout rooms for anyone who'd like to stick around after. Before we get started, I just want to open the floor, ask if anyone has any announcements they'd like to make, any job postings they want to share. You can either come off mute and tell us now, you can put it in the chat box, or you can join us on Slack and post about it there. Any announcements? All right, well, if there are no announcements from the group, we do have an announcement we'd like to share with you. The Data Plus TV data set is now live and ready for you to download. So pick up the remote and pull up a dashboard. Personally, I'm even more excited about Data Plus TV than I was about Data Plus movies, if you remember about this time last year when that came out. So Tableau and IMDb have teamed up again to create this incredible, huge data set about all your favorite TV shows. So what could you dig in and find and share with us about your favorite TV shows or TV stars? I can't wait to find out. So you should get in there, download the data set, create a viz, and then share it with us. You can share it in our HETUG Slack group. You can share it on Tableau Public. We would love to see it. So next up, I'm going to introduce our Meet a Community member, Denny Bromley from Tableau Research. He is a principal research scientist. He has been a software developer in all kinds of startups, and really not startups from music for Jim Henson and Nickelodeon to biotech to visual analytics. He received his PhD from the University of Washington Medical School, designing small molecule cancer drugs. Wow. And at Tableau, he has worked on user-facing visual analytics to try and make non-programmers as powerful as possible. That'd be me. So if you're a fan of Tableau Actions, then you're definitely familiar with Denny's work. So Denny, thank you so much for being with us today. We're really excited to have you.
Thank you. This is awesome. I'm super, super excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Great. Well, could you start off by just telling us a little bit about yourself and describing your role in your team?
Yeah. So as you said, I've had a very non-traditional kind of route through research. So just for myself, I started out with a bunch of startups. I was sort of in orbit around the MIT Media Labs for a long time in Boston, and then ended up doing music and ended up doing crypto at Microsoft, and ended up eventually getting a PhD doing cancer drug design. But even that had this sort of computer science spin. I was doing molecular dynamics simulations. And so then about half of that was running the simulations and saying, oh, look, we could design this drug. And the other half of it was building tools to deal with terabytes of data that rolled out of it. And so that was actually how I ended up at Tableau. Then I was talking to some people there, and they said, hey, we have this tool that looks a lot like your tool, only we're better funded. So then I started doing that. And so then I was a dev at Tableau for a long time, and sort of hacking around the edges until finally I said, hey, I should really kind of do this for real. So I ended up at Tableau Research. So that's me in a nutshell. So our team is awesome. It's so Vidya, Nicole, and Srishti are rock stars. They are all amazing, and machine learning and human-centered computing and NLP. They were doing NLP before it was cool. So they're pretty awesome. And then sort of my role in that I was not doing NLP before it was cool. And so that's been a fun thing to explore. And so I sort of always have one foot in product because I spent so much of my career as a dev, and then so long here at Tableau as a dev. So I don't know. I sort of bring this a little bit of a non-traditional role and a sort of a product focus to the team.
That's pretty mind blowing. So, what research are you and your team working on now?
So we have sort of a bunch of themes. We actually sort of went through this process recently and we're like, okay, let's sort of categorize these things a little bit. And part of it is sort of new interaction techniques. And people saw Tableau gestures and some of the VR stuff we were looking at. Interactivity. So we have sort of multimodal interactivity. So we have Dash. I have Dash paper. Sorry, the title of the paper is Dash coming up at Viz, and Tableau has another one. Excuse me, Vidya has another one called Groot, which has some cool interactivity. So that's definitely part of it. Obviously, there's AI. LLMs are kind of the big word these days, and so we're doing a lot there. That's blending in well with a lot of the NLP work that people were doing before. And then also we've sort of Nicole and I in particular have begun looking at sort of trust and decision making. It actually turns out that people just having the data isn't enough to trust whether or not you should invest $100 million in something. And so there are some opportunities to help people really gain confidence so that they feel like they're doing the right thing, despite just sitting on top of a big pile of data. So that's sort of where we're focusing now, those areas.
Nice. What do you find inspiring in Viz research?
So, gosh, there's a bunch of things. So one is definitely this cool blend of technology and artistry, right? So like the rendering and the visualizations and you're communicating through this visual medium. And that's sort of been a theme all throughout, even all the startups I was with and a bunch of all those things. So I definitely love to have one foot in sort of media. And so that's a big part of it for me personally. I'm always inspired by what you can do with it. So when I was doing my PhD and I was doing the drug design stuff, so I was doing molecular simulations and you look at all these carbon atoms, or actually you simulate all these carbon atoms bouncing around in a protein, and they say, hey, here's some more carbon atoms in a drug, and they're going to come in, they're going to bounce into these, and how does it work? And if you just look at the data, it's a bunch of 3D coordinates, like terabytes of 3D coordinates. And when you visualize it, you can actually see a drug coming in, docking into a pocket on a moving dynamic protein, and you can see the protein change shape over to some allosteric site on the other side of the protein where it actually, say, changes the DNA binding site configuration or something like that. And so there's this huge leap where you have this like 3D coordinates into like, oh, I get it. Like there's this amazing insight. And so that power is just huge. Anytime when you can go from, oh my God, what am I going to do with this data to, oh, I get it. Like that's a gigantic tool, right? And then there's this other thing, which is just this fabulous story. I was at TC, maybe 2018, something like this. And I just gave a talk. And so I sat down having a late lunch next to this woman, and we just got to talking, and she was telling me about how she worked for a school district and how she'd been working for a couple of years to get Tableau. This was when we still had to purchase it outright. And and so basically she said, yeah, working so hard. And in like a month or 2 months or some very short period of time, she'd isolated variables that led to kids dropping out of school, and they had addressed those and they had cut the dropout rate. And by the end of this, like I'm like starting to kind of like tear up a little bit, and I'm looking around like, I'm like, is this like an HR video? Like it was just so like, am I in camera? But no, this was all like legit, right? And this was just one woman who happened to be eating a late lunch that I was chatting with. And so anytime you can do stuff like that, like that's worth getting up in the morning. So that's what I think is cool.
That is such a great story. I love moments like that at Tableau conference. It's what makes it so awesome.
Yeah, it was pretty fun.
What, or maybe I should start with, how did you get into Viz research?
So I guess the real Viz research, I guess, I got into was probably in my PhD program. I'd been in a bunch of animation startups and these kinds of things. So I always was sort of looking at how to render things and that kind of thing. But in terms of actually sort of rendering data and looking at it from that perspective, like I said, so my PhD program was about half drug design, and my advisor was actually like, okay, you need to make a call, and like we're gonna go and like test this in a wet lab, so we're not going to let you off scot-free about just building a bunch of algorithms. So that was one half of my PhD, right? And then, but the other half, to get there, I had to somehow do this. And so I had to somehow generate this data, or I had to generate the data first, MD simulations, and then I had to consume it. And I had about 60 molecular dynamics simulations that I had to basically diff. So you can imagine each of these is a movie, and imagine like diffing a bunch of Western movies, or a bunch, they're not even the same plot line, right? And you have to say like, what's the difference? And you're like, well, how do I mean? So that was the work that I was doing. And in order to do that, I had to come up with a bunch of different visualizations just to get a grip on those sorts of things. And and then sort of before I knew it, I was doing visualization research simply because I had to, because I wasn't going to get a drug design answer if I didn't. And so then somebody from Tableau came and saw a poster I was giving and was like, hey, we're building this thing. And so, then that was when I really kind of jumped into visual analytics full time, because, then I started Tableau when I was neck deep in the visual analytics code. So
we kind of already touched on the next question, but maybe you could elaborate a bit and tell us, how you ended up going down this industry path instead of going the academic institution route. And
yeah, I don't know. I guess I sort of have a soft spot for industry a little bit, because I was in so many startups when I was in Boston. And it's fun. You get to reach so many people. Like, you're actually creating tools. And this isn't, there's a lot of great work being done in academia, but I really like it when I can ship like version 8.5 and people use it, and there's a concrete set of features, and you can release things year after year. And a lot of people in academia just don't have that opportunity. There's not the funding, and there's so much work. And so it's been really fun here to actually collaborate with people in academia to say, hey, like, you're doing amazing work. Can we roll it into this train that we've got moving and get that work out? So that's been one of the really fun things. So I guess that's why I went into industry research, because it's fun to actually have millions of customers who are waiting, quarter over quarter to see what you're doing next. I don't know. So that that's an aspect that I like, but obviously you're also locked in a little bit, and so that's a downside. So, but I like that. I like that.
And you still get to work with people in academia. So.
Oh yeah, no, gosh,
That's awesome.
we have tons of, in fact, lots of Tableau Research alumni are now in academia. So we have Anna and Matt, just went to the University of Waterloo. Obviously, we work with people from Stanford. Obviously, Pat Hanrahan and Chris Stolte, who are out of Stanford, and Jock. So yeah, we have heavy academic ties, and it's really been a fun collaborative partnership to pick up on what they're doing and partner with them to try and, like I said, like put it on this train and bring it to the millions of people who are actually consuming Tableau.
Definitely. Best of both worlds. So now moving into more of your research at Tableau, can you tell us some of your research findings that have made or are making their way into Tableau products?
Yeah, so before I joined Tableau Research proper, and I was still a dev, I was still sort of doing a little bit of research around the edges, which is, and so we had a couple of features that rolled out of that. So set and parameter actions were one of the hackathons that I did earlier on. They were the original hack was a modification of the URL actions. I just put arbitrary code into the URL actions. And so I was like, hey, look, I can change the parameter. So that rolled out to a feature. And then recently worked on a project called Patch Bay, which led to dashboard visibility and access extents and a bunch of other stuff. Basically, it sort of was a new plumbing. There you go. So there was a new plumbing technology under the hood that let us do a bunch of stuff. So that was fun. And then I joined research. And since I've been here, we've been looking at kind of this notion of quantitative semantics. So as language is busy crashing into data, right? LLMs and the rest of it. You would like to be as precise as possible. Like we try and be as precise as we can when we make a viz. So we'd like to do that too if we're going to use natural language to render data. And so we started sort of looking at this notion of quantitative semantics, which is how can we actually convey some degree of accuracy when we're using natural language to render or use natural language to query, right? So like it turns out, like if I say, hey, the stock tanked versus the stock sloped off a little, there's a quantitative difference there, and you may very well make a different data-driven decision based on that quantitative difference. It's not as fine as 3 decimals of accuracy, but it is legit, and so we're kind of looking at that. And so, gosh, there's a bunch of stuff then. So other work that we're doing, we looked at, Nicole and I are looking at data guards, which is basically how to help people do trust in data. So imagine, right, somebody hands a junior analyst, right, who's doing the best they can, but they don't have a lot of experience, hands you a chart and says, you should go to the board of directors and tell them you're going to invest $100 million in this. How do you trust it? Like, okay, like, I don't know. And it turns out this is actually not only a problem that's well known, but people are actively asking for help in this because they want to go in and say, yeah, this is a great chart, or this is not a great chart, or whatever. So we've been looking at some of that. That's a paper that's coming up in Viz. We have a bunch of interactivity. So those latter two, we're sort of trying to look at internal projects right now and rolling them into internal projects in Tableau. We have a bunch of interactivity stuff that we're doing. Like I said, there's a paper called Dash, which is data analysis with semantic hierarchies, but it lets you sort of have high-level text and low-level charts. You can drag and drop between them. So you can pick up a phrase in the text and drag it over to a chart, and it'll make the trend line that phrase was talking about. Cool stuff like that. Or you can like pick up a mark and drag it over to the paragraph that was discussing, profits at Christmas, and it'll say, oh, here, let me talk about that mark in the context of this previous discussion about that kind of thing. So all these interactive capabilities we're obviously looking at trying to bring into Tableau because 95% of the code's already written. It'd be nice if we could sort of like, I don't want to bolt it on its side because then it's sort of kludgy, but it would be nice if we can blend it in a way where it's sort of deeply integrated and it's easy to use. So that's sort of, did I answer the question?
Absolutely.
All right.
That sounds like some really cool stuff coming up.
It's fun stuff. Yeah. And if anybody's Viz, come by and take a look at it. It'll be fun.
So how can we as Tableau users partner with your team to help Tableau build better products?
So a bunch of different ways. So one, kind of the most general and diffuse, but nonetheless is super important, is just ping us and call us and like give us feedback and say, hey, this is really terrible, or this is great, or any of those things, right? Because as users, as Tableau users, you are in the trenches with this thing. And so it's super helpful to just hear from you and say, hey, I've got this great idea, or this was a really bad idea. I mean, there are lots of things, right? I mean, it takes a little bit of a community. Then you can actually become pretty closely involved. So Bridget Cogley, for example, who's one of the visionaries, has published multiple papers with Vidya, and in fact wrote a book with Vidya this last year. And so there's, so I mean, you can publish papers with us. I mean, come and talk to us. I believe you're pointing out here, yeah. So you can sign up, and we always, I mean, obviously, right, there's Viz and there's Kai, and they're about 6 months apart, and we're busy publishing and these things. And so we almost always have prototypes and user studies that we're doing. And so we would love to get your feedback on that. In fact, we always need more people for those with different viewpoints, that kind of thing. So that's a huge thing. And then there are really kind of sort of concrete areas. Like, for example, we have some Vision Pro prototypes up on test flight that we were looking at. And there just aren't that many people with a Vision Pro. So if you've got one and you'd like to play with this and tell us what you think, ping us. So you are part of our community, and we're so grateful for you. So please reach out. I mean, the Tableau community is amazing. So we're just really grateful that you're there.
that existed outside of Tableau Conference, like going up to the booth at Tableau Conference and being like, I have a few minutes. Let me come and sign up to do something. But so this exists like all the time.
I mean, you've got our emails, right? I mean, like it really is genuinely ping us. I mean, it'll say, at least if nothing else, it'll save the rest of my team from just listening to my bad jokes all the time. And they'll be like, I got to respond to this person over here because so hold that. Yeah.
Well, can you give us, as data viz practitioners, one or two takeaways from your Tableau's research that we should take into consideration when we're building a viz?
I think some of the, I'll tell you, for me personally, I think some of the coolest things that have come out that are sort of generally applicable without necessarily going and like building a new technology, right? There have been a bunch of good work on guidelines and best practices. So just simple things. So like last year, Vidya had a great paper on dashboard heuristics. They're building on that this year. Vidya and Nicole on dashboard text, which actually got an honorable mention, I believe, at Viz. And so like just reading down that list, saying like, oh yeah, I should do that. Like it just is going to help things. It's a pretty cheap way of just incrementally improving visualizations and how people consume them and how people pick them up. So that's a really easy thing to do, right? You can read that. Like I think literally at Viz, I think Vidya printed out these little cards that had the heuristics on it. So it's a low investment but pretty high payoff. But then also, I think just as a developer, it's also fun to take a look at the different technologies that we have. So if you're not familiar, for example, with the embedding API or the dashboard extensions API, take a look at those. You can do really cool stuff with some of those things. You're cracking open. I guess Roshni's cracking open the TWIBs, right? Like we have some tools for that. I think technically they're unsupported, but still, like there are, like we want to help you with it, right? So if you're doing these things, yeah, reach out. We have a whole group that's dedicated to sort of the Tableau developer community. If you're using some of these APIs, and if you're building straight in Tableau, look at what the visionaries are doing. Look at Tableau Public for the crazy stuff that's going on there. But yeah, I would say look at the tech that's available, look at the crazy stuff that people are doing, and look at the best practices. And those should sort of help overall raise kind of a generic average viz up materially higher.
Great advice. All right. So before we get into Viz 2024, do you want to tell us, do you use Tableau outside of work? And if so, what's your favorite project you've ever worked on?
So my favorite project that I ever worked on with Tableau was in 2008. So my son was born in 2019. And I want to find a name for him, right? And so I grabbed this. There's a very famous data set. It's up on Kaggle and a few other places probably. With all these names, and they've been popular over time, and it's this beautiful data set. And it's on the order of 500 to 800 names or something. It's large enough that you have to slice and dice. You can't just look at it. And so I was busy using it. I think actually, so we launched set actions in 2018, but I was using it, but I actually gave a talk. So it went down like this. I was trying to figure out what the name should be. And I was talking to my wife, who thinks I'm a total nerd, but there you go. That she knew that in advance. And so we gave this talk on set action. Everybody's like, this is amazing. And then after that, the set action talk was filled. Bethany Lyon's set action talk was completely filled. And there were like 100 people outside. And so I said, okay, I'll wing it. And so we opened up this new ballroom, and I went up there with my laptop, no script, no prepared slides, nothing, no workbook, anything. And I said, great, I'm trying to solve this problem with my son's name. Maybe you can help me out. And so I gave a talk on set actions and trying to like build this thing out. And yeah, so that is probably my favorite use of that, because at the end of this, I had this cool dashboard where you could click on a name and it would find things with similar trends and filter out other things. And you do this and you like slide things. I don't know. It was a fun use of it. And it actually highlighted the notion that no matter how good the tools are, it comes down to the user, because at the end of the day, I was indecisive, and it turns out that my son has 2 middle names. So, yeah, but the tool did its job beautifully.
I think that's pretty cool. And I love set action. So thank you. Thank you for that.
Once the idea was there, it took a team much larger than myself to actually bring it to fruition. So
yeah, undoubtedly it takes a lot of people. Is there anything else you want to share before we start talking about the Viz 2024?
No, other than I'm just so happy to be here, and please do reach out if there are things that you like or you don't like or you want to be part of, or you're like, hey, I want to be a part of user study or whatever. Just please do reach out, whether it's a Tableau conference or just virtually. Yeah, we love you guys, all of you.
Awesome. So Viz 2024, tell us a little bit about what that is and what Tableau Research is presenting on.
Yeah, so what is Viz 2024? It's an awesome Viz conference. It covers, gosh, I mean, there's so much stuff, right? I mean, there's biomedical, and there's theory papers, and there's interactivity papers, and there's all this stuff. If you're doing anything in Viz, there's going to be something for you at Viz 2024. And it's actually pretty cool, because Viz is sort of part of the fabric here. We've been sponsoring it. We've been sponsoring Viz for a long time. We sort of, I don't know, I think it's nice that we're sort of putting our money where our heart is a little bit. We published there. We have multiple people on the organizing committee. A couple years ago, Stolte and company got the test of time for the Polaris paper. Last year, Matt had the temerity to get both a test of time paper and a best paper award at the same conference. So it's kind of part of what we think about every year when we're working. We're like, oh, that'll be great at Viz. So yeah, Viz, and we love Viz. It's definitely part of kind of who we are, maybe as a research fabric. What we're doing, we have 4 papers and 3 workshops there. We have Dash, like I mentioned that one, sort of bimodal. You can drag and drop between text and charts, and so you can have sort of high level descriptions, like, oh, if you're looking at the example is, if you're looking at this real estate data set for a family of 4, it's really important that you should pay attention to these things, and you can pick up these things and drag that phrase over to the chart, and it'll graph, number of bedrooms by number of bathrooms or whatever. And so there's this notion of sort of aligning semantics between high level discussion and low level charts and move around. So that's pretty fun. What else do we have? We have that. We have Groot, which is a cool interactive analytics paper that video was on, and obviously some others were on. We have a text and dashboards analysis. Again, that was sort of an extension of these best heuristics. I'm missing one paper. What's data guards, my paper. Okay, yeah, that's the trust in. So that's the trust in making sort of confident data-driven decisions. And then we have a couple of really cool workshops. One on vocalizing uncertainty and generative voices, and some cool tests going on there. One about using emojis for visualization, and another one for natural language for visualization. Yep, right there at the top. So yeah, there's just a bunch of stuff there. And like I said, if you're there, come up and say hi, and let's grab a cup of coffee or whatever. That's one of the great things about all of these get-togethers, is it's having the coffee with people, or presenting a paper is great, but it's the coffee talks afterwards that are the best.
Well, I never even heard of this before Roshni brought it to my attention. So.
Oh gosh. Okay. Yeah, it's awesome. Absolutely.
Super excited for the watch parties. So what are you looking forward to the most at Viz 2024?
So the most. Okay. So
no, it's okay.
Was it?
I don't know. Thank you. You too.
Yeah. So, oh gosh. So, okay. So there's best papers, which is like all clumped up into one talk, right? Which is amazing. It's like, here's the best stuff ever. And so you can take a look at that. The art exhibit is great and is super cool. And there's just, like I said, that sort of speaks to my media upbringing, which is fabulous. There's a whole section on tools and SDK, like new tools would like make my job easier and let me prototype things faster, which I love. And all things physical science. So, like I said, I did my work in the medical school, right? So anything that's involved with biomedicine or physics or any of that kind of stuff, and that includes like a bunch of graph papers because people are looking at ontologies and people are looking at different connectivity, right? Because like a protein, it's actually a graph if you kind of look at it that way. So there's all that kind of good stuff. And then actually there's a really cool talk this year. It's a panel, 20 years of visual analytics. And that has some amazing panelists. It's down there somewhere, like Daniel Keim. I mean, like these are like the founders of there you go, right there. Yeah, these are the founders almost of the field. And so, or at least some of the initial visionaries. So that's going to be a really good one. Just to hear what these people think when they were making these amazing calls 20 years ago. And like, oh yeah, you were right about that. So that'll be a fun one. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Yes. Well, you've already highlighted several, but are there any other sessions that you would suggest for, I guess, higher ed practitioners who might be there in person?
Well, there are no bad talks at Viz. So anything that strikes you as like, oh, I'm really into this, that, there's going to be a section on it probably. But do take a look at the workshops and tutorials. Those can be really good. They're introductory ones if you haven't done much of this before. And there's a specific one that I want to go to, which is on doing scientific research. So there's, it's hard to point out because people have different interests, but if you're just starting out, check out one. Tamara, I believe, is teaching that's the one. That's if you're new to the field, absolutely go take a look at that one.
Awesome. Well, I know that Roshni shared the link in the chat. So if you want to sign up for our Viz 2024 TUG Watch Parties, those are coming up in October. And I forget how many. Roshni, are there like 10 maybe?
We are planning on 10. So you should be able to see them here. Right now, these are all still tentative. It all depends on how many people sign up. And if there's something else that is scheduled at one of these times that you think would be better for us as a group, let us know. Email us at higheredtug@gmail.com or reach out on Slack. And we can always, adjust what sessions we're going to be streaming live. So the way this will work is if you've ever been to a TC watch party, I know we did a few of those a couple years ago and in the past and during like the pandemic days, where we would just watch, a session together and then talk about it in the breaks. That's basically what we're going to be doing with these sessions. And, it is going to be mostly Tableau user group folks, both from HETUG and from other tugs. Although who knows, we'll see. Who knows who actually will show up? But we're going to watch all of these virtually and have little discussions in between during breaks. Think about like how does what we learned in these sessions or what was presented in the sessions, how might that impact what we do as practitioners? What types of things we might want to keep our eyes out on or, learn more about, or in some cases, as Denny mentioned, how can we help researchers do research that is actually important to us. And our whole goal is, again, to introduce the TUG community to Viz 2024, because, like Jenny said, very few people probably have heard of Viz before today. But it's really important to, it has really important impacts on what we actually do day to day, because it impacts what goes into some of the tools like Tableau and others. And it impacts how we as a community sort of think about how we're displaying data, how we're sharing data, how we're helping the decision makers that we support in our universities make those decisions and sort of like make those judgment calls. So I feel like I was on a soapbox there. I should stop now. But I think we are hitting most, maybe not all of the Tableau papers. But we'll see. Again, we'll see depending on who shows up and what we want to see in the moment. So If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. And I will also just say, if you want access to the papers and access to the tutorials and workshops, the things that are not here, you can get a virtual, or you can register virtually. There is a charge. It's like $20 less if you are in some countries with lower GDPs. But just go to the IEEEviz.org website and look under attend, and you'll be able to see what that looks like. You also get access to the papers afterwards and to the videos that were recorded of any sessions that were recorded. So there's a whole bunch of really cool stuff.
And make sure you individually register for each of the different time slots for the watch party, because I thought I had signed up for everything and I had only signed up for one. And so I had to go and make sure I signed up for all the rest. Even though I'm on vacation, I'm still planning to to watch as much as I can.
Dedication. Great. And one more thing, if I can figure out how to share a screen properly. There are also opportunities to participate if you are in the Tampa Bay, St. Petersburg area. One of the sort of the co-conferences, I think. I don't remember what they're called in real life, but Viz in Practice is all about how how practitioners and researchers can work together. And the group behind Viz in Practice is doing a Viz in Practice demo jam session. Basically, if you are in the area and are available and would like to do a 4 to 6 minute demo of an interactive visualization or visualization system that you've built or that you use, they want to talk to you. Just contact VIP at IEEEviz.org, and I'll put that in the chat in a second too. They are kind of trying to lock down who is going to be participating in the demo jam this week. So try to get that email out. And if you have any questions, also same email. They can sort of explain what they're looking for and answer any questions that you have. So that's that. And Denny, thank you. Thank you so much for coming to talk to us about what you guys do in Tableau Research and about Viz 2024. We're super excited to sort of learn more and kind of get involved more, I think, with the research that you guys do and just with the research community as a whole. And we may invite you back to talk about some of your papers at a future HETUG.
I would be honored. This was a lot of fun. And actually, one thing I forgot to mention is there's a Tableau sponsoring the West Coast party. You don't have to be from the West Coast. We're just because we're on the West Coast. So if you're at Viz, just come on by and hang out. And I'm usually the guy who's handing out the drink tickets. So, I'm a popular guy. So so come on by that and it'll be fun.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I think we'll turn it over to Andrew to introduce our tips and tricks speaker.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's my pleasure to introduce Eric Atchison, who's the Vice President for Strategic Research at the Arkansas State University System. In this role, Eric has developed system-wide strategic research function for the 7 institutions in the ASU system and provides broad leadership to the system's effective use of information resources to facilitate data collection, analytics, and performance metrics. Eric serves as the treasurer for the Arkansas Institutional Research Organization and the secretary for the Southern Association for Institutional Research. He was previously on the National Center for Educational Statistics National Post-Secondary Education Cooperative. In 2021, he co-founded the Node for IR/IE, a free weekly newsletter providing analysis and resources to more than 2,100 subscribers, including this very happy subscriber. So thanks to Eric and his team for putting that together for us. And with that, I will turn it over to him.
Hey, thank you, Andrew, and good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be with you today. Always great to connect with Jenny again. In fact, she brought me into this after I presented at App State Analytics Day, so just a plug for that program. In fact, what I'm going to talk to you today actually builds off of a presentation that I got there because someone asked a question, and then I came back to work the next day and said, let's figure it out. And thank you for the invitation to join you. Also, good to talk to Roshni and the entire team here at HETUG. This is a really fantastic opportunity to bring hundreds of people together for the same common interest, and so I greatly appreciate it. I saw a couple of my colleagues on the call too, so I'm going to give them a quick shout out. Joe Stankovic, Michael Lehman, Deborah Lee. Thanks for the happy faces there. Always good to see friendly faces, and I hope I get to meet you if I haven't already one day at a meeting or even virtually again. As Andrew mentioned, I serve as the vice president here at the Arkansas State University system, but really I'm an educator at heart. I serve as an IPEDS educator for the Association for Institutional Research. I'm currently an instructor with Ball State University and their Data Literacy Institute, and I also am teaching at Agnes Scott College over in Decatur, Georgia, a grad class on data collection. So this is just kind of how I work in the world, and how I found my passion is really just to kind of talk to and share with other people. And so with that, Andrew, is it okay if I go ahead and share my screen and jump in?
I believe so, unless Roshni has some permission override. I think give it a shot.
Right. Thank you. I just realized that that slide was still going, so I didn't want to override anything. There we go. Can everybody see my my lovely retention dashboard that I built many years ago?
We can
Thank
see it, yes.
Great, awesome. So one thing I should probably say about a university system, for those of you who are affiliated with an individual campus or organization, my work at the university system is really twofold. One is to provide kind of higher level analysis across all of our institutions for legislative audiences, our entire board of trustees, as well as the general public, but really to kind of take that one step further. The other side of my job is to dig deeper than the resources might allow at our individual campuses, and to provide direct support to each of them. In fact, Michael Lehman on the call is actually at one of our campuses. And so he might be able to testify to that if I don't do it justice. But one of the ways that I've tried to do this is through effective data visualization, as well as recognizing that there are limits to what we should disclose in terms of student success, faculty analytics, and things such as that. So the topic of today's talk is all about data suppression, because in some ways, I'm a very like free the data kind of person, but at the same time, we have to respect privacy boundaries that, are set by FERPA and expectations of our students, as well as our institutions as a whole. So one way that I've found to be able to do this is to create data suppression calculated fields within Tableau. And by the way, I only use Tableau Public. This is being recorded, so I don't want to say it, but I don't pay for it, because my product is the public domain. Like, my audience is the public in terms of legislative audiences, again, boards of trustees. So everything that I produce really has to be kind of geared toward a public frame. And so just as an example, you can see here, we do look at first year student retention. We break it down in a numerous number of ways: gender, residence, race, ethnicity, financial aid type. It keeps going and going. And by the way, this is publicly available. We've got parameter control for high school or first term GPA, as well as our entrance test scores. But then the filtering mechanisms at the top allow you to slice it and dice it however you want. You can see right away, just in this initial view, that our unreported gender category is completely suppressed, right? Also, our Native Hawaiian population of students within this first-time student cohort was suppressed for fall 2018 and fall 2021. And that's simply because we had fewer than 5 students in each of these types of categories. And 5 is the number that I set here at the system. Within our state, data suppression is set at less than 11. But because of the work that I do and the analytical power that we have with so much more in-depth, detailed data, I decided to set our data suppression limits at 5, simply because we have programs and majors and race ethnicity categories at some of our institutions that go below 11, or rather below 10. And then once you get below 5, that's really where we start to see kind of the identity factor coming into play. So with that being said, as kind of the guiding framework, I want to kind of walk you through 2 ways in which I've learned and how to suppress data using Tableau Public. And for all sakes and purposes, you can do this in Tableau Desktop as well. Now, the first way is really the initial way that I started doing it. And by the way, you're looking at a test dashboard that I train people on all the time. I've trained people from the food industry, and I've trained people from Kellogg cereals, Riceland Foods, businesses and everywhere, because in the end, data is mostly data. But we use a test database using IPEDS data, which I thought was still appropriate for this presentation simply because we're higher ed. So looking at completers, I just kind of use the example of saying, well, what if we wanted to suppress the number of completers by degree level that fall below a certain threshold? Let's just say 100, right? You notice Alabama has very few completers of certificates of less than 12 weeks, right? 35, Maine and Maryland. And so the first step you want to take is, of course, to set your data suppression limit. And then within Tableau, it's a pretty simple process. It doesn't take very long. You'll want to create a calculated field. And the first way that I do it, or I've done it, is just to do a simple if then, right? So if the sum of 2020 C grant, there it is. C 2020, pardon me, forgot my variable names. Grand total, there you go. First time's the hardest. It's like typing your password when someone else is looking over your shoulder, right? So if the sum of C 2020 grand total, right, is greater than 100, right? So very simple again, then we're going to sum that field, right? Very straightforward, right? Then of course we put the else statement, and let's just call the else 0, and then we end it. Okay, so most people have created a kind of the so to speak, like the if then statements. This is a pretty straightforward one, right? But this is really setting you up for the first step. And it looks like I have an error here. And so I'm going to take a second and just take out this first bracket I accidentally typed in front of the sum. And that should clean it up. All right. So there's our if-then statement. The next step, once you hit OK, is to create another calculated field. And I always call this just the suppression symbol because it helps me remember what to put on my dashboard. And so for the suppression symbol, what I'm going to do is just create a case statement. And I'm going to call this as a string. So I'm going to refer to that new field that we just created. And I'm going to say, when the completers is a string, we're going to treat it as a string, that when that string is 0, or the value that we put as the else value, right? If it's less than 100. So when it's 0, then I want to show this text, and I always call it like DS or NA, data suppressed or not available, right? And then again, do another else string, and then completers value. So really you're doing if then, and then a case statement to determine what is actually shown. So this calculation too is valid. And so we'll hit OK. Now that we have our suppression symbol created as well as our initial calculation, I'm going to take myself back to, staying on sheet 1. And instead of having the values of the sum in the text card, I'm going to replace that with the data suppression field. And notice how it initially doubles up. And look at that. Alabama is now going to be suppressed. Maine, Maryland also going to be suppressed. And so all you have to do is remove the actual values from that text card, and voila, you've now suppressed your data. I will say though, the question that I got at App State Analytics Day was, it took away the numeric properties of this field when you used the case statement and called it a string, and they were 100% correct. So I took another step further and decided, maybe we can suppress data in 2 different ways. And really, y'all, this is up to your level of comfort, however you want to do it, right? If you're not too concerned about it, you can do it either way, one or the other, but they are different. So all we have to do to do it a different way, rather that maintains the numeric properties, is to create another calculated field. We'll call this one just completers 2. And in this one, we're not going to do an if then and then call up, a case statement like we did before. Instead, what we're going to do is just create a fixed level of detail calculation. So here, we'll open that squiggly bracket and call fixed. And we're going to fix on our year. We're going to fix on our state abbreviation because that's the level of detail we have here. And then we're going to fix on the award level code, right? So we've got each of those now fixed. And we're going to call up then the if statement. Go on the next line for everybody. So if the sum of, I'll get it right this time, right? C 2020 grand totals, is then greater than 100, then we'll sum it, right? And then we'll end that as again, close that bigger bracket or that squiggly bracket. So y'all might be asking yourselves, wait a second, you just did this simple if then, but you're not telling me how to actually suppress the symbol, right? Like we created that second calculation for earlier. And you're right, I didn't. Because when you do a fixed level of detail calculation, now I can bring that into the text, right? And it's basically going to blank out, right? It's basically going to blank out, create no space there in those suppressed areas, right? It's only going to show things that are above it. Well, all you have to do is right click and format, and notice that there is under the format pane, there's a special value section, and that special value section, you can define the text that goes here. So you can call that an asterisk, or you can call that, again, DS, right? And in doing so, it maintains the numeric qualities of the field. You've got your commas there. And it also allows you to pretty much call it whatever you want, right? I prefer this way now that I've worked through it, but either way works. And in case anyone's wondering, I will send out step-by-step directions for this because this is one of those, it only took about a page for each version. But this has saved us a lot of time, and it's allowed us to show even more data to the public and to our constituents. And so thanks again to everyone for me being here. But if I could have just kind of one, I guess, because since I'm holding the mic, I'm also the chair of the Association for Institutional Research's Nominations and Elections Committee, and our nominations for elected office close on September 22nd. So if anyone wants to nominate somebody, yourself or someone else, feel free to click the link that I just put in the chat. We could use, any nominations of folks that are willing to serve. And with that, I'll open up to questions, Andrew.
So, if anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat or come off mute to ask. So far, we have one. Any tips on how to incorporate suppression on graphical parts of a dashboard?
Oh, man, that's a good question. That's actually probably my next step. So this, I believe, may still work as a graphical data suppression because, if I decided to call this a bar chart, right? I think I could still do it. Let me take a look. We'll just do it by award level. And let me just bring up the state. Good question. I hadn't gotten that far today. So I'll pull up the state as a filter. And let's see. Okay, so notice, good point, Lynn. Notice that Alabama is not showing, right? At all. But yet, how do we show that? If anybody has any ideas, I'd love to hear them. But otherwise, Lynn, I'll take your question and run with it.
And then come back at a future HETUG to present on it?
Hey, I'm here anytime you need me, Roshni, especially if you're the
Excellent.
DJ.
Always. But I also do take requests. Sometimes I remember about them when we're putting together the playlist. All All right, thank you so much. There's a lot of holy cow, this is really amazing and really clear. So thank you so much for sharing sharing how you do data suppression in Tableau. I am going to steal the screen share, and we will be sharing Eric's the PDF that Eric sent us on the meeting page when we put the recording up. I assume that's why you sent us the PDF. So
Yes, ma'am.
great. Awesome. All right, so we've got 27 minutes. Let's see how much of this I can get through in that time. So I'm here to talk about what's underneath your TWIB and TIFL files. So the XML and JSON that is underneath the hood or underneath the dashboard walk, because I love my puns. And I love nothing more than mixing code with non-code. I am rambling because I'm trying to find my cursor so I can move a thing off my screen, but it looks like that is not possible. So hopefully you guys are seeing the dashboard and not seeing my mouse move around a whole bunch. Oh,
Your dashboard.
excellent. All right, so TWIB and TIFL, those are two of the acronyms that we've talked about today. So TWIB are Tableau workbooks. They're the unpackaged workbooks as opposed to TWIBICs, which are the packaged workbooks. So the packaged workbooks just have your data and any other additional stuff. So if you have an image or an icon on your in your dashboard, that's going to be part of the TWIBICs, but it's not going to be part of the TWIB file. Special shapes and things are included in the TWIBICs, but just pointers are in the TWIB file. TIFLs are Tableau prep flow files. And just for funsies, actually not there yet. Both TWIBICs and TIFL files are actually zip files. So just like those, compressed files that you might have had to use all the time back, 20 years ago, and that most people probably don't use too much anymore. The Tableau package workbooks and prep flows are zip files. They may just have a different extension. And I'll show how to break those apart. And then some bonus acronyms that mean absolutely nothing for today, but I still want to cover them only because there's a dinosaur at the end. So data sources have their own extension files. Tableau preferences files, which we talked about a couple months ago after the Harry Potter which sorting hat are you presentation with respect to the Tableau color manager tool. Preference files are where you put color palettes, and this might be something that you want to keep in mind when we're talking about some of the formatting changes you can make with packaged workbooks. Those are TPS files. Tableau also has a lot of fun. So taco files are used for web data connectors because they kind of wrap all of the stuff that you need to be able to connect to a web-based data source through an API in this neat little taco shell. And then finally, this is why these extra ones are here, because there's a dinosaur. Tableau extensions. So these are things like extensions like the Viz extensions that were released shortly after Tableau conference. These are all T-Rex files because dinosaurs Flex is the data dev mascot, and my stuff Flex also very much approves. So why are we bothering with looking underneath the hood for in our Tableau workbooks? The big reason is because find and replace are really, really helpful tools compared to having to click around and move from one dashboard to another or one sheet to another. And this presentation came about because Jen McCarthy asked this question about, are there any good resources about Tableau's XML file structure? And why? Because she wanted to go from this step-by-step or this 16-step process of making a change in one text container to change a single word on multiple dashboards, and it's a very, very manual change, right? And you want to make sure, did I hit this dashboard or did I accidentally click and go one dashboard over, right? It's very prone to mistakes or errors, and then you're double, triple checking your work. But with the XML file, you can do a find and a replace, and once you're good with your find and replace, you can do a replace all, which can really just save you a lot of time and prevent you from needing to double check or triple check or quadruple check every small change that you made. I found it really helpful for switching field references, but preserving defaults. So if you've set default colors or default sorts in the data pane, but then you find out that you actually have to change change those settings. It's really easy to do that, to bring in a new field and either copy those defaults over or replace the field just by replacing the name in the text file, and getting all of those default settings already in place instead of having to recreate them from from Tableau Desktop. I'm also, if you haven't figured it out, a huge keyboard fan over mouse fan, and it's really helpful to be able to do a lot of like copying and pasting with your keyboard, to, let's say, recreate folders in the data pane. If you are replacing a data source, one of the most painful pieces of replacing a data source is having to rearrange. I'm a folder fan in the data pane, so having to rearrange all of those dimensions and measures into the proper folders and trying to make the folder names be the same. There's a lot of like side by side, like, okay, I'm going to have one copy of the workbook open on one screen and the other in the other, and then I'm going to go field by field to make sure every folder is the same. Here, you don't have to do that. You can actually copy and paste huge chunks of the XML code from one data source to another, to recreate the folder structure, and be able to replace a data source without causing yourself a whole bunch of trouble. One of my pet peeves is nested containers. Like if you've ever seen that little triangle show up when you're moving container dimensions around, and all of a sudden you let go and the triangle showing up, and suddenly you've created 75 tiled containers in your dashboard. Well, that's just a lot of extra space, and it makes a lot of other formatting, like if you want things to auto resize, it makes a lot of that just really, really hard. And you can clean up one by one in the layout panel on your dashboard, but it is very time consuming, and I have messed that up more times than I'd like to count. But editing in the XML can be a really quick way of getting that done. Copying content on a dashboard is another one of those changes. So, there is an option since 2021, I want to say, maybe 2020, to be able to copy a dashboard item. But I don't know if it's actually not an option, but if I want to copy multiple objects at once or copy a container, I don't think I've been able to do that successfully. But with copy paste in your XML, you can. I mentioned earlier formatting for colors. One of the things that we often have to do is make reports that look just like Excel. And sometimes that involves using 2 or 3 or 7 different worksheets all together and then trying to make things align. And sometimes you just can't get the mouse to line up just right for a column. You can get that just right to the pixel by looking in the XML and just copying a width over. And then finally, there's a whole bunch of stuff around just getting insight into how the workbook is structured to help you design a little bit better, and to understand what changes have been made. So version control is a huge thing. Being able to see what's actually happening under the code with joins and relationships, what data type is actually what Tableau is reading. In Tableau flows, being able to see these are the pivots I'm doing, these are the aggregations, this is what I'm doing to clean and join and whatnot. And some of that, we don't want to have to recreate that every time you use a single data source. So if there's a way that you can get that information out and send it to the folks who sort of support your data sources on the development side, so like your database programmers and stuff like that, you may be able to avoid having to create prep flows simply because they fix the problem at the source. And there's just a whole lot more, some of which we are going to hopefully have time to look at. So a few warnings before you ever try to edit your XML or the JSON under your TIFL file. Back up your files. Denny mentioned this in passing earlier. All of these updates are not supported. It is everywhere you see any Tableau official, I'm going to call it documentation. It's not really documentation. Anything you see about editing the XML in Tableau community forums is usually followed up with something that says this is not supported. So the first thing that you should do is back up your files, because if you screw up, you want to be able to get back to what you had before that was working or was working better. And Tableau is not going to help you do that. Tableau support will be like, nope, not supported. And the other thing is make sure you have a text editor that has syntax highlighting so that you can see more easily visually how things are related. I'm a fan of Notepad++ on Windows. It has some additional plugins that can be helpful for if you're trying to do version control to compare the before and the after to make sure you've fixed all the things that you wanted to change, or to see what you did change so you can back out a change. I have no idea what the Mac or Linux versions of any of these things are, but Notepad++ is my friend. There are a couple of links that, Jenny, if you could post them from into the chat. This is, again, not supported by Tableau, so there are some community resources. Some of them are a little older, so some new features may not be documented. And I have yet to find any documentation about what a TIFL file looks like. So these two links are all about the XML behind a dashboard. So I mentioned earlier that Twibix and TIFL files are zip files. So there's a few steps involved in converting those. Twibix files are actually really easy. All you have to do is, if you're on a Windows machine, right click and choose unpackage. If you have Tableau installed on your Tableau desktop installed on your computer, it will see, oh, this is a Tableau file, and it will create these two objects that you see on the left here. So you have your Twib file, and then next there's also a file folder, and that file folder contains all of the data. If you had images or anything else embedded in your Twibix file, those will also be in that files folder. The thing that we're going to end up editing is the TWIB file, the TWB file. That's where the XML is. On the Tableau prep flow side, it's a little bit more complicated. You actually have to take your TIFL file, again, always make a backup, and change the extension from .tfl to .zip, and then you should be able to unpackage the same way you unpackage any other compressed zip file. And what ends up getting spit out of that is 4 separate files in a folder. You've got your display settings. This is where things like, if you remember from Matt's presentation last month, Matt Beeman's presentation on prep, he was using colors and creating groups to group steps together. All of that is in the display settings. So it's really, what do you see in Tableau prep in terms of how the each step or the flows are organized. This is a JSON file, this display settings. Also a JSON file is this flow file. And that is where all of the actual changes that you made. So things like creating a new field, using, grouping values within a field, aggregations, joins, pivots, unpivots. I feel like there's some things that I'm missing. All of that stuff, though, anything that kind of occurs below in the bottom half of your Tableau prep flow, that is all in this flow file. And I will, I just saw that Jimmy mentioned, she's messed with the XML, but never the JSON. I hadn't either until this morning. So I learned a good bit in just a few minutes. But the flow file, again, this is the documentation that you would work with whoever actually does your database programming if you wanted to recreate this to make some of the prep flow work operationalized. This is what you would use and sort of work through with them. There's a couple of other files in there, a flow graph thumbnail. This is basically a tiny image of what your flow looks like. It is completely useless, and I could not for the life of me figure out what Maestro metadata stood for. So, or had in it. It was just a bunch of gobbledygook to me. Also JSON, but gobbledygook nonetheless. So I've said JSON and XML a whole bunch of times. I probably should have prefaced with, here's what they mean. So XML is actually said XML. Extensible Markup Language is what it stands for. And basically it's a way to organize or structure your data in a shareable format or a transferable format. So a couple of things you'll notice here. And I mentioned earlier that Notepad++ is my tool of choice for this, at least on the Windows side, because it does the syntax highlighting. So you see all of these things that are in angle brackets, those are bluish, purplish, whatever color it is you're seeing that's lighter than the than the words like flex and dinosaur and tableau and data dev and the Flintstones. So what this does is it packages each object. So in this case, I'm talking about a stuffy, the one that you see on my face picture all the time. And so flex has a name. Its name is flex. And so you've got this name tag that is, again, angle brackets at the beginning, flex, which is the value, and then there's a closing end tag angle bracket / name. And then each of these other things. So Flex is of a type dinosaur. Flex has some interests. One of those interests is Tableau. Another is data dev. Another is the Flintstones because, dinosaurs. Flex also has some friends. One of his friends is Cyrus. He's my office dinosaur. Flex is the travel one. He also has a friend called Dino from the Flintstones and also Orbity from the Jetsons. Can you tell that I watch a whole lot of cartoons? And then all of these, even the nested ones, you'll see there's that opening tag that is just the word. And then at the end, there's this closing tag that starts with a angle bracket / and then the name of the tag. Each of those tags usually appears in pairs. And in order for something to be well formed, you have to have those pairs. However, you'll see in line 14 here that we've got this enemies tag. There is no counterpart to the enemies tag, but you'll see that / is at the end, and that's just an empty tag. That's just how this is structured because, well, Flex is loved by everyone. Flex has no enemies, of course. So JSON is basically the same thing, but just it's a different format used. I think it's a more modern format. I'm going to say that, but not really have anything to back that up. Some people say it's pronounced JSON. I have never heard it pronounced JSON. I've always heard it pronounced JSON, which stands for JavaScript Object Notation. So again, we have this stuffy object and has all of the same fields. So you see name is in line 1, just like it's in line 2 on the XML side on the left. Got type, dinosaur. So the format is different. So you have curly braces instead of angle brackets as sort of your separator. But you'll notice that there's no end tags or anything like that. You basically just have a curly brace for the object, and then each of the different fields within that is in double quotes with a semicolon, or sorry, a colon after it, and then the value also in quotes. Then you've got a comma and the same thing. So name Flex, type dinosaur, interests. For something like interests and friends, where we have multiple values, there's an array, a list of all of the values. Again, comma separated, comma and quote delimited, right? And that's all of these, both with XML and JSON. The creator of this file is able to say, this is what a well-formed whatever it is looks like. So we're going to go look at some Tableau things. I'm going to choose very carefully what I show because I've got way more than 10 minutes worth of stuff. So let's just open up a Tableau workbook. So I have here on my screen a file folder with all of the stuff that I had planned to show you. And I'm going to pick my book 1 .twib. And this is an empty workbook. Like if I open it up in Tableau Desktop, I may already have it open. We'll find out. And it'll open like 7 times, which is fine. There is no data in here. Yeah, see, look, like I said, it'll open 7 times. There's no data. There's just the sheet 1. If I go to data source, there's nothing. And so just by default, this is what the XML structure looks like, which looks like a whole lot, I know. But I have the syntax highlighting happening. So I'm just gonna collapse out some of these. I'm sure there's a shortcut that I should be using, but I'm not going to. But you'll see there's each of these chunks, there's a worksheet chunk, and in that worksheet chunk is a single worksheet. The name is sheet 1. If you go back to our Tableau workbook, that is the name of the worksheet here. And then within that, there's the view. So if you ever go to export, well, this has nothing on it. If you ever go to worksheet and export, and you're asked, do you want to export the view? Do you want to export all these other things? Like the legend or the caption or all of that. Well, what's in the view is the chart or visualization. You've got style stuff. So here again, we have nothing, but if you had colors or formatting or padding, or you change the background of the dashboard to be blue instead of the default whitish gray, you would see that information in styles. You'd see things like pane. So that is what you're seeing on the side there. And rows and columns are your rows and columns shelf. So a lot of this is you can very easily map this to what you're seeing in your workbook. This is a useless workbook to look at because it has no data. So let's look at one that does have a little bit of data. So all I've done here, yes, I do need to update my Tableau. All I've done here is add a Tableau prep flow extract. And then I don't have anything on this sheet. So I'm going to open up this file in Notepad++, and you'll see there's just a whole lot more information like in here. So there's actual data sources. I can look at each individual data source. In this case, I only have one. I can look at each connection. Again, in this case, I only have one. But you can see things like the metadata record. So you can see, okay, this is a field. The field is called reporting year, at least in the file, the incoming file. And then I have named it reporting year as well, with the space in between, right? And a lot of this, it will take some trial and error, but you can sort of figure it out. And one thing that I find useful is, and this is going to be a really bad example, so let me see if I can find the right example to show this. All right, we're gonna open up another couple copies of further down the line. I have no idea what these ones are gonna have in them, but there's actual content in some of these. I've probably opened too many. My computer's like, dude, what are you doing? Why are you opening so many files? All right, so here, I'm just gonna go side by side. We're gonna look at the workbook. So there's a sheet called employee counts by year. There's an overall counts tab that has other things on it. Honestly, I have no idea what the difference is between these two. I'm sure there was one. But I can actually verify what that difference is just by opening both of these. I'm going to open them both in Notepad++, and Notepad++ has this nifty plugin compare option. So I'm going to compare, and I'm going to see what is it that I changed. So in this case, there was a field that is called milestone 1 and another that's called source 1 on one side, and on the other side, that caption, the alias, the file, the field name alias just doesn't exist on the other side. But I can scroll through this way and just like see, okay, what are the changes? And these changes are all related to this source 1, milestone 1 versus not having that. This plugin is something that you have to download separately. So if you go to plugins and plugins admin, you'll see you can search and see that plugins is compare is one of the plugins that's available in there. All right. I did have examples for a whole bunch of other things, but let's look at the harder part of this, which is a TIFL file. So as I mentioned earlier, and I'm going to demo this, to create a TIFL file, and note, in all of these other things where I opened it, I did not make a copy. That's because I wasn't editing. You should not do that. You should always make a copy. And in Windows, you can just control and drag, and you'll get this copy file. And I'm gonna rename this copy to file flow3. Again, I have no idea what I've done in this. And I'm gonna try to edit it with Notepad++. And what you will see is this gobbledygook here. That is not very useful because if you remember what I mentioned earlier, TIFL files are packaged workbooks. So they're zip files, right? So how do we change that? So because I'm editing, I'm going to make a copy and I'm going to rename that copy, whatever that is called, .zip. And yes, I am sure that I want to change this extension type. And if I open this up, I will see those 4 files that I had earlier. And I'm going to open the display settings because there is no file type on here. So I always go in and have to change that. And you'll see by default, like it's all black text. For JSON files I have found, and I have no idea if it's just a me setting or if it's a Notepad++ setting, but I found that with these, because there is no file type, I have to actually go in and change the language to JSON. And when I do that, all of this stuff gets colored in so I can see what things are. The TIFL file has a bunch of stuff at the beginning that I don't really understand the need or what these values, like these orange values, I have no idea what they actually do. But what this field order section lets me do is actually change. Actually now that I'm looking at this, I think I know what this does now. So if I were to change this value here, that's 3,100 to 4,000. Oops, and I don't know where I just typed there. If I were to change that to 4,000, it would show up like that number must be the sort order. So this -50 is the first field. 75, I think, is the next one. Or no, there's a regular 50. So if I were to change whatever it was to 4,000, it would show up at the end because there's nothing higher than 4,000 when you're looking at the columns in Tableau Prep. Other things you'll see here are these this flow group node. So Matt mentioned last time that groups are really helpful for grouping your flow, and this group node just helps you do just that. So if I search for this ID down here, I'm just going to find all in document. I can see that there's two references to it. One of them is here, so this is the node itself. I can see what the color is of it. I can see where it is in my flow, and that sort of thing. So that's the display files. There again, the main thing that I think I can see needing to use that for is again changing the order of the default columns, and changing the colors and the layout within Tableau Prep. The other file is the flow file, which again I had to go in and change the formatting of. And this is the JSON file that actually shows what is happening. And I'm going to skip a whole bunch ahead because I got 2 seconds. But you'll notice that there's certain things. So this under node type here, you can see this add column. So what this means is I have created a column called metric split 1, and this is the formula for that metric split 1. You'll see things like this ID. So this is the ID of that change within the step. And then you'll see next node. So this next node ID, well, this is the next thing that happened. So after I add this column, I go to this next node ID, and I'm going to find that. And the next thing I do after I add that column is I'm going to add this other column called metric split 2. And this is what that does. So there's a lot of nesting in here. It is worth troubleshooting. At some point, I will probably come back and do a fuller part of this presentation to show some examples, maybe in tips and tricks. Maybe we'll have like, a couple of XML tricks every once in a while. But yeah, so that is the very, very, very quick rundown of how to look at your at the XML and the JSON under your Tableau workbooks and prep files. Yeah, I don't know that I thought I could do even that in 20 minutes or however much time I had. So we are about to close up. Before we go, we want to make sure that you have what's up next. So we want to know what you thought of today's meeting. Yes, please tell us that we rushed on time. We know that. We'll maybe try to fix it in the future. Who knows? We want you to go ahead and register for next month's session. The October HETUG is going to be after Viz 2024 on October 22nd. Gonna throw some links in the chat. And if you're looking to present at even if it's a smaller 5-minute tip or trick, or what you think is a 1-minute tip or trick that will probably end up being 2 to 5 minutes, we want to hear from you, so go ahead and fill out the presenter form. We also want to promote a few things that are coming up or that have happened. You're going to hear about X TUG Watch Parties for the 20 millionth time, but in addition to that, the Northern New England TUG, which is hosted at by the Rue Institute of Northeastern, is happening on the 19th, which is Thursday. A few folks from the Rue Institute will be presenting at IEEE Viz. The recording of the Future of Tableau webinar that happened last month is up on YouTube. Data Plus TV, again, TV is amazing. I heart TV, in case you can't tell by my Flintstones and Jetsons references. And again, the Viz 2024 X TUG Watch Parties, those are all happening. They are all also on the HETUG main page. You'll see a whole bunch of sessions, one for each of those. So that is all for today. We are going to open up breakout rooms. Before we do that, we want to thank everyone for coming, for sticking around. We definitely wanted to thank Denny and Eric for presenting. And thank you again for participating, asking questions in the chat. And thank you.